Good evening and welcome. I'm Roy Blitzer, and our show is Ask Dr. Business. We are continuing our series on first jobs, and we're very fortunate this evening to have Dr. Ken Low as our guest. He has just closed his practice of ophthalmology and is going to talk about his learnings from his very interesting and creative career before he opened up his practice. Ken, I'd like to remind everybody that they have an opportunity to make contact here, but the telephones are broken. So much for live TV. If you'd like to call in a question, you may text it to area code, and we will get that and we'll be able to answer your question. Now, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you study? And how did you get to be where you are today?
The hard way. No, I was born and raised in Oakland for the first 7 years of my life. Folks moved up to the hills of Hayward, where my dad built and ran a grocery store for about 5 years. So I learned a little bit about retail, and then went to Berkeley for school, and a year in between at UOP, and headed out to New York in a place called Albany for my medical school training. Came back and did a year of internship in pediatrics up at San Francisco.
Pediatric ophthalmology?
No, just pediatrics. And ended up in Hollywood Presbyterian in Los Angeles to do my formal training in ophthalmology.
Now, tell us about your first job, Ken. What was it? Where was it? What did you do? And more important for me, what did you learn?
My first jobs actually was in the grocery store with my folks. And being 7 years old, I had to sort out the old pop bottles. And at that time, when you returned...
Pop meaning soda.
Soda. So at that time, when you returned your Coke bottle, they were put in boxes, crates where the regular Cokes were shipped in, and the driver would take it back to the company, they'd wash it and refill it. So they were totally recyclable. Then since we were in the hills of Hayward, my job was to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, burn all the garbage in this big incinerator about 6 feet across, rake up all the leaves from the eucalyptus trees, and clean the parking lot.
When time did you have to be at school?
School? Well, school didn't start until 9.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy, in Massachusetts, it started at 8:30. You were a charmed...
Well, no, actually, I was always, there was the...
You were always
the
late?
early comers and the late comers. Actually, I was always in the late comers, and we started at 10 to 3.
So you had a lot of chance to sort bottles and burn rubbish.
And I got to do all the jobs in the grocery store.
Such as?
I cleaned the butcher department. I would sweep the floors. I'd spray.
And you were 7 or 8, 9 years old? Your parents gave you that responsibility? Was there a job description?
I was told. When they paid me, it was 60 cents an hour, a penny a minute.
Wow.
And then I ended up being a checker, which was wonderful because I always thought that I was very shy. And when you're a checker, you get to speak to 10, 15 people an hour, no matter what. And it made me feel more comfortable talking with people.
Well, speaking of talking to people, I want to remind everybody that we're here with Ken Low, who is a physician of ophthalmology who recently closed his practice and is talking a little bit about his work career before he became an independent helping professional. The telephones are broken. As I said before, welcome to live TV. But you can call and text your message and your question, and I will get it and answer it. The phone number is one more time. Now, let's work through your jobs. After the grocery store, you were a student and didn't have another job after that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was fortunate because my folks worked hard, and they put me through school. They gave me everything that I needed that made me successful, and they had to because I was not blessed with a smart gene. And
where did you do your undergraduate work?
At Berkeley.
You had to be smart. Even then, it was 10% of the class The smart kids got
No,
in?
actually, at that time, you just had to have a B average, which I got because at the last 2 years of high school, you always got an A in PE.
We have a question. Hold on one moment.
Mike asks, what was the most difficult thing about your first job?
Question. What was the most difficult thing about your first job?
I had to work.
No, seriously, I think what was difficult about it?
Difficult because it wasn't the most pleasant thing to do, because pop bottles are dirty. And
Did you wear rubber gloves?
they didn't have rubber gloves, they just had work gloves at that time. You were put in the back of the store, and it was the most ungratifying job around.
And you learned? You didn't want that kind of work again?
I learned that I didn't want to do it the rest of my life.
Smart decision.
I knew that I did not want to work in retail, and I did not want to work in a grocery store.
Well, that's why a first job, Ken, is very important. You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about your needs and your wants.
I found that any job you do, you always learn something that benefits you later on. It helped me in my practice. For instance,
You probably never had Coke bottles, I'm sure. You didn't drink Coke.
Nah. Well, I can't tell you that because where I snuck it. But anything you do, it always becomes beneficial, because in my practice, when I met new patients, there was something that I found out about them that I had in common, whether it be going to Boston, whether it be working in a grocery store, or going to the same bar. I could bond. They would feel a commonality between us.
So people skills, even in the grocery store.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Mike, I hope that answered your question. Thank you so much. I would encourage people to continue to text their questions for Ken. Despite the lack of the phones, we seem to be moving forward positively. The phone number for your text question is... Now let's talk a little bit about what the situation was with people who wanted to work for you. Did you ever hire anyone? Was there anyone that you had to put into a first job situation?
Actually, in our field, the medical assistants are usually young, and they're coming fresh out of school, and they have definitely no experience. Depending on their background, they sometimes had people skills, but I would always go over with them how to talk. In fact, I brought in several doctors during my career, and every single one of them, I sat in front of them and I had them examine me, and I had them explain as if I were the patient. And invariably, I would fall asleep, or I would get, even though I knew everything in the field, they would get too technical, and they would not.
So you were giving them a job interview of practicality.
Correct.
And did they pass, a lot of them?
Oh, they didn't have a choice.
Well, they didn't get the job.
Fortunately, they took some of my advice, and they incorporated in their practice.
I'm fascinated about the fact that you were fortunate enough to not have any real-time experience as an ophthalmologist before you set up your practice. What advice did you give your kids in their first jobs? What did you tell them to do when they had to enter the workforce?
Didn't have to give them much advice. I think the advice that I gave them was do everything and anything you can to get your experience. Second thing is, it was instilled, they developed this themselves, and I can't take credit, but both of mine, well, it's because we didn't give them the smart gene either, that they had to work hard.
I think you may be underestimating that, but...
They had to work hard to get through school and get their grades to get where they are. So what they learned was how to strive. And I think that when you strive and you develop your business or whatever, that's where you get your biggest appreciation, your most gratification.
I agree. Now tell me, if you were starting out today, would you tell a young physician to test out the ophthalmology world before becoming a specialist in it and before setting up a practice? Wouldn't it be beneficial to get experience? Like if you started to be in retailing forever, then your job would have your dad's job would have been very meaningful.
Yes, and the way you do it is that if you're in a private practice setting or if you're in a clinic, you go in with open eyes and you notice what's going on. You notice what's going on at that front desk. You see how the...
So be observant is another good advice.
Correct.
Now, tell me a little bit about some of the people you met in the grocery store. Did you ever bump into them again when you had your practice? Did you ever see these people? Did they ever see you as an adult if they only saw you as a young man?
Well, let's put it this way. One brought in my old high school yearbook for the staff to see.
Oh, that's
and that was the time the Beatles, everybody had long hair. Of course, I had a short crew cut.
Oh, really? You were a rebel? A rebel?
No, at that time, you weren't with it. Because that's when people converted being very, very straight to a hippie. And I was kind of late to grow out my hair.
You were sort of like on the conservative straight end, you would think?
You had to be kind of conservative because...
Although you went to Berkeley, you must have gotten a little hip during those years.
Well, I was there through the 4 years of turmoil. Because of that, I never had to write a term paper.
I hope some academics are listening to the show and watching. You never wrote a term paper?
Never.
What courses did you take?
Well, you know how you have to take English?
You do.
And at that time, you had to write a 1,000-word essay per week. And that was before the computer. That's when you typed. If you made a mistake, you had to use that eraser. I told you I didn't have the smart gene, right?
But I think you were more clever than you admitted.
Well, you know, at that time you had the SAT achievement test. You had to score 450 or 475 to take what they call the Subject A to qualify to take English 1A. I got 450. So I didn't even qualify to take the test to qualify. But it was actually a godsend because I took English in a junior college. It was a marvelous course. Didn't have to write a paper. And
you got into medical school with this kind of
yeah, because I got an A out of that.
Well, let me remind everyone to call in, Ken. This is a delightful discussion. Please understand that we have no phones this evening. We are victims of live TV at its best. The text questions, if they come to area code, my colleague who is our studio tech and a delightful fellow, you can get that question answered, and Ken will do it, and I will do whatever I can to make sure that the answer is thorough and complete. Okay, so you're now a young practicing ophthalmologist. What did you take away from that first job that you were able to apply, besides the doing everything you could?
To put your heart and soul into it. No matter what, there's no doubt. I never looked back saying I should have did this, should have done that.
No regrets.
I just put my head down and I did it because I believed in myself. And when you think about it, who should you believe in more than yourself?
Well, you and Oprah, I agree with her. I think that's terrific. The reality is it's a tough world out there. It's not an easy haul. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you have to have a 4.28 to get into Berkeley, and you do have to
It's nice
write
being
paper.
old. Nice being old.
Now, you had mentioned when we were doing our prep time that you never got your degree?
No.
How did that happen?
Well, you know, when you're kind of borderline, you always have to look at the situation, and you have to understand why they did it, how they did it, and the reasoning behind it. So essentially, I looked at the requirements, and they only required 3 years of college. And they were accepting people after 3 years of college. So I said to myself, these people didn't get a degree, so why should I take courses that would jeopardize my grade point average? Because I established it early. And why should I take courses that I will never use? So I never took any upper division courses because all your pre-med requirements were undergrad.
Right.
So I took a surveying course for a summer job. I took a materials course so I could work the road department, building roads during the summer.
So you did have other jobs, which is good.
Yeah, they were just summer jobs, but they weren't really
Did you
career.
learn anything from those jobs?
Every single job I did, I learned because my dad helped me build my office building, and I knew enough about materials. I knew about surveying, so we surveyed the property together, and I could oversee any contractor that does work.
So you did take away some stuff from your
Every
jobs.
single job, I cannot think of anything I did that I did not use.
Well, I think I know the answer to this, but would you have done anything differently? Looking at hindsight, in terms of how you got to where you are, would you have done anything differently?
The only thing that I wish I could have done was be more free and carefree.
Talk a little bit about that. Did you find a practice of ophthalmology restrictive?
Oh, no, 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 no. You know how people take a year off and they backpack? I never had the courage to backpack.
But you took a year off, you said.
Yeah. So I astounded the medical community back in the 90s, and I wrote a letter saying I'm gone for a year. And then when I came back, I wanted to spend time with my kids, and I wanted to pick them up. After school, I wanted to have dinner with them. So I would only work part-time. I brought in a partner, and he to get new patients, he would accumulate them and work in the afternoon. I leave at 3 to pick up my kids.
Good for you.
And so I was kind of I was very liberal in that sense because I valued, and I still do, I value my time that I had with my family more than I did money.
Well, but it's interesting when you talked about being free, the nature of medicine is quite precise. You can't be a free spirit. There are certain things you have to do to get things to work.
Actually, no, because in medicine, it's not concrete. It's what we're doing is we're trying to work with a body
We have
that
a
was
question. Excuse me, just one moment. Please.
Jeremy asks, would you move for your first job, or would you have moved for your first job?
Jeremy's question, would you have moved locations for your first job?
Well,
How
actually,
important would it have been?
Actually, I was ready to because I took a year off after my training. And I just did some local temps. That means, you substitute here and there. So I put my name in all these agencies. I remember on February 1st in 1982, I started my practice, my first day. And 3 weeks later, I got this call. And they said, we have a job for you for 6 months in Pango Pango. And I said, oh my God, because I was a beach person at that time. I said, oh, and I was single. I would have moved if I could have put my practice in suspension and the loans in suspension, I would have gone.
So you would have moved for your first job.
Yeah.
I wonder if we asked this question of Bay Area kids today, I bet they would move in a minute. It's such an expensive part of the country to live here that if they were offered a comparable job, I don't know what the answer would be, but I would think they would move. Unless they're in love with someone that lives here, they would not maybe want to move.
And it depends too, because I didn't have any ties. I had essentially, I didn't have anybody to support. And I think I was even so foolish that first year that I didn't work. I don't think I had medical insurance because I didn't even think about it.
Interesting. Well, you were on a very interesting trend because my assessment, having been to an ophthalmologist just last week, that it's a pretty, they measure your pressure, they measure your drainage for your glaucomas. That's pretty precise, don't you think?
Everything is precise. Well, it's funny, it's all relative because when we do surgery, the other specialties think that we're phenomenal because we work with such small things. When you look under the surgical microscope and you see the movements, they're huge. So you get used to it. And so everybody adapts to what you have to do.
And you found that challenging, I'm sure.
Oh,
Did you
I loved
ever
it.
take an art class? Were you dexterous with your hands? Did you ever take anything that would prepare you for doing this?
It's funny because in a lot of the surgical specialties, they want you to take a year or two of general surgery.
Right.
However, my chief did not want you to do it because their techniques were so different from what we did. He didn't want us to develop the bad habits of a general surgeon. So our field is totally different. Our vocabulary is different. Our hours are different, fortunately.
We have another question. This, I have to admit, this new texting session is working very well.
Hector asks, what first job would you recommend for someone who took a year off from school?
Great. I like that. What first job would you recommend for someone who took a year off from school?
Any job that's different different than the field that he's
so
working
not in the specialty.
Because when you go to school, you really don't know what you want to do. I think the statistics is that 33% of the people that graduate from college don't use their degree.
Right.
So why not venture out and try something different? It gives you an opportunity.
Do you think someone would hire you? That's one of the problems. The specialties are difficult. That if you're a business major and you want to become an art curator, the chances are then it's going to be difficult.
You do not have to be on the upper level. You could be a janitor and you can observe. You could be a server in a restaurant, and you know how many people start as a server's dishwasher and they get their successful restaurant. It's because they can see the day-to-day operation.
I hope Hector is listening. This is great advice.
I have a cousin in Hawaii who did phenomenal in real estate, business real estate, and his sons took it over. But he made his sons do the work, cleaning the bathrooms and understanding the job. And the other advice is, do not have
so take an entry-level job in a field that's different than what you studied or
Correct.
different than you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Now, what would you tell the employer that wants to hire you from this job to get back into that field? That's a challenging situation because not all the employers are as insightful as you might be.
Well, you're talking about the employer that...
After you've had this job where you
Yeah.
were, and you want to get back into your field, someone's going to...
when you look at a resume now, you just want to make sure they have some kind of work experience. And in my field, in my office, I didn't care what experience people had. It was easier for me to train, and I could have a better employee by training them myself. My office managers were in-house trained, and I only had 2 office managers.
In all those years? That's pretty good.
Really 2. And they just came from the ranks.
Hector, I hope that's answered your question. We won't be able to hear from you, but I'm very pleased you brought that up. That was terrific. As we're winding down, we only have a few more minutes, believe it or not. I'm interested to look at the qualities that you would look for to hire someone for a first job. I did hear hardworking. I did hear willing to do grunt work. What else? What other qualities are you looking for in a first job person?
If you take it the other direction, the qualities I didn't like
Okay,
are people
we can
that were obstinate and thought they knew too much, and they didn't want to learn. I want somebody that's eager to learn and is willing to have open ears, whether they take the advice or not, but at least they listen.
Now, what about tardiness? What about
That doesn't
punctuality?
exist.
You don't care about that?
No, it doesn't exist. You don't tolerate anybody that's tardy. You don't tolerate anybody that doesn't work hard, because in my office, it's a virus. I had a core, my employees ranged from 6 years, and most of them had been with me 15, 20, 25, 30 years.
Well, you must be doing something right as a manager as well.
They took good care of me.
Well, I want every one of our listeners to know that when we were preparing for the show, one of our technical specialists said that the greatest advice that he wished he had is if you're going to be late, call your employer and tell them. Just don't walk in late with your hands in your pockets and ashamed. And I think that's very good practical advice. Alert them.
Yeah.
My train is late. I missed my bus. Can't find a parking space. Whatever it is, let the person know that you're going to be late. Now, we have about 2 minutes left. Let's look at the experiences you've had and see if you can capture one thing that you did on a job that was the most helpful for you throughout your long career.
I think it was being exposed to people and talking to people.
So rapping and getting conversation going.
Correct, and feeling and knowing how to make people feel comfortable. In my profession, they're very nervous when they come to see you because you're the doctor and most people are afraid to talk. So there are techniques that I had that
And if
I
you're
would
at the
bond them.
ophthalmologist, it's somewhat serious. You're not at the optometrist. You're there at somebody that can,
Yeah.
a heavy-duty guy.
Yeah, and there are techniques that are, in fact, I give a course at the National Academy meeting on how to talk to people. And it is just so invaluable. It was invaluable to me because,
And you learned this as a young boy? That's wonderful.
no, it took me 60 some odd years because it's an accumulation of knowledge. And even up to the last day, I was learning.
Well, if that's another thing that we hear underneath this is be willing to learn.
Yeah.
Be open to new ideas, be open to people's suggestions, never say no, and always be among the people who are receptive to input and information. Well, I want everybody to know that our show isn't closing down. I want to wish everyone a very happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy Kwanzaa, whatever your preference is. The people here want you to enjoy yourself and take good care. We're back on the air on January 17th. My guest is a woman named Susan Brown, who who's had a career in sales her entire life. She's now doing coaching and helping people become better salespeople, and she'll be talking about her first job and what she learned from the experience and how she made it work. I want to thank everybody, especially under the circumstances of the faulty phones. I want to thank my colleague for letting us use his cell phone to text, and I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening. Thank you very much, and that's
thank
the end
you.
of our show.